Marine HQ stood as one of the three great powers on the seas alongside the emperors and the former warlords, and the most decorated figure of the Marines is undoubtedly Garp the Fist, a legendary Marine who once cornered the Pirate King Roger many times and led the Navy alongside Sengoku for over 2 decades. He was considered to be the devil to all pirates, and he earned himself the title of Hero of the Navy due to his impact in the defeat of the Rocks pirates, who were the strongest crew at the time. Not only does Garp have a strong sense of justice, but he also has a strong sense of freedom, so much so that he turned down the position of Admiral multiple times because he has more freedom to do what he wants as a Vice Admiral. Garp's strength may come across as straightforward, however throughout the years it's become apparent to me that he's somewhat underrated in the community, so we'll go through his feats, statements and narrative to determine the true strength of the Navy's hero. But before we delve into it though, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy content like this, and as always your support is much appreciated. 56 years before the current story, Garp joined the Navy alongside Sengoku and Suru, who would later become his long-standing comrades. Over the years, Garp would achieve the rank of Vice Admiral and develop a rivalry with Roger. This rivalry was so heated that when Fleet Admiral Kong called up Garp, who was seemingly on vacation, to take a mission concerning the Rocks Pirates and Celestial Dragons, Garp wasn't interested in the slightest, not until Roger was said to be involved as well. As you all know, this led to the Gods Valley incident whereby the Marines led by Garp teamed up with Roger and his crew to take down the Rocks pirates, who were the strongest pirate crew at the time. The era after Rocks' defeat up until Roger's execution was referred to as Roger's era, and Garp's rivalry with Roger continued into these years. Roger even said they fought many times to the death, and the fact that both of them survived their death matches portrays their power to be on par with each other. Some may try to refute this narrative argument for Garp by referring to Shiki's fights with the Marines, where he calls them garbage worms that couldn't have captured Roger. Firstly, when Shiki said this, Sengoku and Garp hadn't arrived yet, so he'd just be talking to the fodder Marines that he just beat up. But even if he was including them, it still doesn't even matter. Shiki makes it very apparent that he's butthurt that he couldn't defeat Roger and believes he's entitled to end him personally, as they lived through the same era and Roger earned his respect. Shiki trash talking Garp and Sengoku by calling them garbage worms isn't a counter to Roger admitting he had death matches with Garp. Not only that, but Roger also acknowledges that both Garp and Sengoku are Marines that can truly fight him, which adds more credence to Shiki just being salty. To give Shiki some credit here, Roger wasn't actually captured by the Marines and instead turned himself in, so I guess he was right to be suspicious of the news. Another refutation you may hear is about Shiki fighting both Garp and Sengoku at the same time and causing half of Marineford to be destroyed. Just because a lot of destruction is caused doesn't necessarily mean it was a high difficulty fight for Garp and Sengoku. These three all have ridiculous powers, such as Shiki's ability to levitate things he touches, Sengoku can produce powerful shockwaves, and Garp can level a town with just a single punch. Obviously, a battle between these three top tiers with these powers would cause a lot of damage. Some will try to use this as an anti-feat for Garp and Sengoku, however it's established during the Marineford War that the Admirals suppressed their power as much as possible in order to cause the least amount of damage to their HQ as possible. Sengoku is also implied to have suppressed his power as he tries to protect the island from Blackbeard, who is trying to sink it. So not only doesn't the damage to Marineford necessarily indicate the difficulty of the fight, but Garp and Sengoku were most likely suppressed against Shiki, which means none of this is an anti-feat for Prime Garp being on Roger's level. Magazine 8 adds to this narrative as well with a relationship chart that lists Garp, Sengoku, Roger and Shiki as rivals to one another. Garp is not only known as the hero of the Navy, but he's also known as the Fist, and this title was born from his victory against Don Chin Chow. 8 years after the Gods Valley incident, Garp faced off against Chin Chow in an attempt to destroy his cone-shaped head that had never been dented. This is particularly impressive as it's stated in Don Chin Chow's River Card entry that he not only fought Garp, but also fought Roger as well. We don't know when in Roger's career their battles occurred, but whenever it was, Chin Chow's head was so tough that even Roger couldn't dent it. After warming up by destroying 8 mountains, Garp was able to overpower Chin Chao and completely dent his head. This clash was described in Magazine 9 to be a clash of their armament Haki, and that Garp's was one step better. Despite Chin Chao being a strong conqueror, it's not confirmed if he has advanced conqueror's Haki, and at the time of the Dressrosa arc, this wasn't an established concept yet. Since Magazine 9 only highlights their armament Haki, and that's the only thing that's apparent on panel, it's best to take it at face value. So with Garp's armament Haki alone, he was able to defeat one of the biggest named pirates at the time with just a single punch. Garp's ability to do this in general is actually supported by his Vivicard entry, which states that his fist imbued with armament Haki is like a cannonball that can pulverize fierce warriors of the New World in a single strike, and this remains true even in his old age. Although Garp has definitely grown weaker due to old age, the extent to which he declined is sometimes either exaggerated or downplayed. The first time Garp comments on his decline was post Enies Lobby, where he says the cannonballs he throws don't fly half as fast as they used to. Some may interpret this to mean that Garp is 50% of his prime strength, however this line isn't to be taken literally. It's just a figure of speech and a natural sounding translation that Viz chose to go for. The literal translation of this line will be on the screen, but it's just suggesting that Garp's physical strength declined in general by an unquantifiable amount. On the other hand, some take it in the opposite direction, believing he's almost if not as strong as his prime, which has a lot to do with this misinterpreted SBS answer about old characters in One Piece. Although Oda intends to depict elderly folk as those who haven't lost their strength, it doesn't necessarily mean they lost literally 0%, but rather just haven't completely fallen off a cliff and still remain strong in a general sense. This is the most consistent interpretation, as there are multiple statements and implications said by characters that suggest there is a noticeable decline in strength that accompanies old age. Having said all that, Garp is still a top tier in the series even as an old man, and the first time we get a glimpse of what Garp is truly like was in Marineford when he overpowers Marco and stops him from saving Ace. This is pretty significant, as of all the attacks Marco had been hit by during the war, only Garp's is shown to deal lasting damage despite Marco's regen, which includes Kizaru's attack aimed for Whitebeard. This could just be the result of Marco's regen efficacy decreasing, as we know it in some way tied to his stamina, and by this point over 90 minutes had passed since the war began. After sending Marco back flying, he assumed the role of the last line of defense and sat on the Admiral's seat. This is significant to note because Garp has always been portrayed as kind of like the 4th Admiral even in his old age. As you all know, one of the reasons Garp declined the promotion to Admiral is because that would force him under the direct command of the Celestial Dragons, which goes against his own moral compass. However, because of Garp's accomplishments and stature, they couldn't eliminate him for his insubordination. Even as a retired Marine, Garp is still valued by Crossguild to be as wanted as a Navy Admiral who have bounties of 3 crowns or approximately 3 billion berries. All of this is important to note because the Admirals are stated to be the Navy's greatest military power, or essentially the most powerful fighting officers in the Navy. I used to be guilty of this as well, but although the Admiral's title suggests they are the strongest Marines, Garp has always been an exception to this due to being eligible for this rank. This is especially true post timeskip in the case of Fujitora and Greenbull, because Garp retired from active duty, only keeping his rank for the purpose of training young Marines. This is reiterated in the Blue Deep Databook, which states that Garp retired from the front lines and is now dedicated to training the next generation of Marines. All that's to say is, although there's still room for debate with Garp versus the Logia Admirals pre-timeskip, there's no concrete evidence for the 2 new Admirals to be stronger than Garp simply by virtue of their Admiral title as of this recording. This subtopic was kind of teased at the end of Marineford when Garp wanted to kill Akainu, but is actually somewhat addressed in the Battle of Hachinosu where Garp fights former Admiral Aokiji. As much as people may want to deny it, Kuzan was blatantly not fighting at his best, as he was still conflicted with his choice to become a pirate and being forced to take down his mentor who he still cares for. This is made abundantly clear when Garp tells Kuzan as a final lesson that wavering is a sign of weakness, and this concept has been echoed throughout the story as well. However, despite Kuzan's mental hurdles in this fight, it's not like Garp was in the most advantageous situation either. In order to save Kobe, he essentially had to raid an Emperor's main base with the help of a bunch of kids. Imagine if Uta was captured by Kaido and Shanks could only pull up to Onigashima with a bunch of rock stars. That's basically what Garp did. That's not to say the Sword Marines were completely useless, however Garp undoubtedly had to do a massive carry job. The battle starts off with Garp being frozen by Kuzan's ice ball, which he easily breaks free from, then he blitzes Kuzan and buries him in the ground using his blue hole technique. While Kuzan is climbing out of his temporary grave, Garp is fighting the rest of the Blackbeard pirates, including some of the Titanic captains, and the first to fall was San Juan Wolf, who was knocked out into the sea. Vasco's shot then follows up with his drunken spitfire technique, which Garp easily reacts to and blocks it using the bodies of some pirates, which he uses like a Molotov and throws them at the surrounding pirates. Garp's deemed as a monster for his power to stand up against many pirates, which goes back to my point earlier about Garp not being in the most advantageous situation. It was said by Olympus that not even the strongest men can match the power of numbers, and a clear example is the Onigashima raid itself, but more specifically in the case of Who's Who versus Jinbei. Jinbei was somewhat struggling against base Who's Who simply because he was getting jumped by his fodder subordinates. However, when it became a 1v1, Jinbei was able to comfortably defeat a full-powered Who's Who. Garp not only has to fight Kuzan, but also the Titanic captains and dozens of fodder pirates, which aren't the most favourable odds. Kuzan returns to the battle after Garp beats up some fodder pirates and is able to continue fighting. However, before they could continue, Garp used himself as a shield to protect Kobe from Shiryu, who was invisible. We don't really know how observation Haki interacts with the clear fruit, but it's still a great perception feat to sense what invisible Shiryu was about to do and could potentially be a case of future sight. Not only that, but given the circumstances, Garp probably would have taken less damage than he otherwise would have if it was a one-on-one fight. This whole scene is framed as Garp doing a sacrificial type of move to protect his student, so it's most likely not supposed to be seen as a knock against Garp's endurance, especially considering Garp could withstand an ice Haki amped punch to the face from a man stronger than Shiryu. It's also not clear whether or not Garp used Haki in this moment to protect himself, which makes Shiryu's feat all the more questionable. Despite being weakened by Shiryu's attack, Garp was still able to withstand it and overpower Shiryu by slamming him into the ground, which injured him. Shiryu is without a doubt the strongest Titanic captain after Kuzan, and as the head jailer of Impel Down, he was on par with Magellan, who was so strong that the likes of Crocodile, Ivankov and Jinbei were forced to run away rather than face his poison. Garp and Kuzan would go on to exchange fists, with Kuzan using his ice glove and Garp using a Haki coated fist, which sent both of them flying. Whether or not they used advanced Conqueror's Haki in this moment is up for interpretation, however the main takeaway is that it was an even clash of their powers. Garp was slower to get back up from their clash, but it's pretty clear that it was because of his stab wound. Kuzan got blitzed and knocked down when Garp got up and is called soft for showing concern, which goes back to the mental hurdles he was going through. Ultimately, Garp outperformed Kuzan regardless of the nerfs on both sides. As much as people will say Kuzan was mentally nerfed and suppressed in this fight, which he definitely was, Garp was vastly outnumbered and didn't use any name techniques in 2 of the 3 one-on-one situations. That's not to say the nerfs were equal on both sides in every situation, as it's very clear in the last clash that Kuzan was blatantly caught off guard. Even though his mental hurdles were present throughout the fight, Kuzan definitely steeled his resolve more for the second clash, which resulted in a fairly equal exchange. Of all the exchanges in the fight, this best represents how they actually compare and portrays Garp as a rival to the strongest admirals. Kuzan was the only Blackbeard pirate present who could challenge Garp, and if he wasn't there, the battle portrayed that Garp could give the rest of the Titanic captains a run for their money or potentially win solo. This isn't too far-fetched considering Eiichiro was considered to be a threat to the Blackbeard pirates after Marineford, and although they've gotten stronger since then, they would be without their captain against Garp. Garp proved that despite not accepting the rank of admiral, he remained qualified for it even in his retired years. Aokiji and Eiichiro had a 10-day battle for the position of Fleet Admiral, with Akainu taking the slightest edge. Garp rivaling Kuzan just blatantly puts him on that pedestal, so when he says he'd kill Akainu at the end of Marineford, it doesn't sound crazy for him to say that, especially considering Akainu had just gone down fighting Whitebeard. Whitebeard, even in his old age, was considered to be the strongest man in the world, and is stated or implied to be such multiple times before, during and after the Marineford War. Even Shanks recognized Whitebeard to still be at the top of the pirate world, and was also recognized as the king of the sea. Even if you were to be skeptical about these strongest man statements, this should at least remain true for his raw power that is stated to be able to destroy the world, and Suru even says there's no safe haven from Whitebeard's power. Despite both of them being suppressed, Akainu and Whitebeard were able to match each other's powers as well as block and parry each other's attacks. Akainu directly scales to Kuzan due to their 10-day battle, and Garp was able to rival Kuzan. In their short clash, Aokiji briefly got the upper hand on Whitebeard as he restrained his movements, which opened up a free shot, only for Whitebeard to be helped by Jozu. Blackbeard considered Kuzan to be a threat when he lashed out and was ready to fight his whole crew, and opted to talk things out to calm him down. Garp was also able to rival Whitebeard in their prime, and their powers continue to rival each other in their old age. So no matter what angle you take, even in his old age, Garp is objectively among the pinnacle. It should go without saying that Garp can use all three types of Haki, as well as the advanced applications of both Armament and Conqueror's Haki. He hasn't blatantly used Future Sight as of this recording, but given his pedigree, it wouldn't come across as a surprise. Personally, I think Garp sensing Shiryu while he was invisible is actually a case of Future Sight, being able to foresee Kobe being stabbed and reacting to that bad future, but that's still just a theory. Garp is the second Marine to be confirmed to be a Conqueror, and the first to show the advanced application, which is further proof that Garp is among the handful of the very strongest. Of all the top tiers in One Piece past and present, there's only one man who gets by without a special weapon or a devil fruit. All he has is a Haki powered fist, and that alone was more than enough to become a terror for all pirates. That man is none other than Garp the Fist, and the hero of the Navy. That's all for this one, so let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. I've been the one and only Zage, and until next time.